Right now, half of the state is a childcare desert. And that means that for every slot that's available, there are 3 kids who need it. That number jumps to 70% being a childcare desert if you look at just rural areas in Wisconsin. Um, so we've got a huge problem in terms of availability. There just are not enough teachers, not enough centers, and not enough slots. Secondarily, there's a huge affordability problem. And that's because the cost of childcare for many people is more expensive than going to the University of Wisconsin. At the place where my 2-year-old goes and where my other kids went, I could actually afford to send 2 kids to UW-Madison for the cost of 1 year of infant care. That's crazy. And the third problem, which is related, is that childcare workers and just care work in general is among the lowest paid work in our society. It's extremely difficult work. It's very, very high skill. Um, you know, just imagine being responsible for 8 2-year-olds and trying to get them all to use the toilet and get their snowsuits on. And when the average wage is $11 to $13 an hour, you can make more virtually anywhere else, Culver's, Quick Trip, Walmart. And that's why 4 out of 5 early childhood educators who have degrees in that field, who have a passion for it and wanted to do it, are out of the field. So all those things combine to make childcare unavailable, unaffordable, and that has a huge drag on our economy. And that's why now in Wisconsin, women's labor force participation is back down to the level that it was at in the 1980s.
I think Kelta did a really great job of summing up what I like to call the trifecta of the childcare crisis. It's a 3-legged stool, and if one thing's out of balance, the whole thing's going to topple. The affordability, the wages we're paying, and the quality we want to offer. We want women and men to go to school to get a degree, to provide the highest quality childcare, and then they come out of that 4-year college with student debt, and now we're making $30,000 on the high end in a salary. It's not a living wage for the work that these wonderful humans are doing every day.
For me, in case you aren't familiar with my story, I became a stay-at-home mom. I was working at a job that I loved, and when we found out we were going to have our second child, I was not going to be able to afford childcare. I was working as a library aide at a school. I was working with kids every day. I loved it, but the wages that I was making were so low that basically all my salary was going to go to childcare. And that was even finding childcare in the lower end, because one thing that mothers or families find themselves in a situation often is that there's just not enough licensed care out there that's available. So they have to turn to unlicensed care. And sometimes it works out really good. It worked out really well for us when we had our first child. We found a stay-at-home mom that would take in kids. She charged a very low rate. I feel bad about how little we were paying her. But sometimes those situations can turn out to be unsafe because there is no oversight over those unlicensed situations. And so that's a gamble that parents have to take with their children. Their most precious thing that they have in their lives, you have to trust with other people. And it can become a scary situation. So it comes down to parents just don't really have choices available. We talk a lot about wanting parents to have choices in how they raise their children and the things that they can do. And in the case of childcare, often there is no choice. You either end up on waiting lists and you're just waiting for that first slot to open at any center that's available, or you're taking the route that we did where we have to do some unlicensed care, or you realize that you just can't afford it and you drop out of the workforce completely.
As a working mother, I would say we had a lot of the same stressors. And fortunately, I guess our kids were far enough apart that maybe we shared a year of them in daycare at the same time. But like, to get your child into a center is very difficult and very stressful, to try to find anything that has availability, and then to make sure that the care that they're providing is like what you're looking for as far as care. So once we found a place, we were really fortunate that it worked out and it had a lot of flexibility for our family too. But the flexibility piece is another piece that, you know, I mean, obviously the childcare center has their needs that they need to meet for their employees. And then from the parent perspective, like, you don't want to be paying when you're not needing the childcare too. So it's just a really tricky thing to balance, and a lot of the salary, a good portion of the salary was going to paying for childcare too. And then, you know, I'll just kind of add into the conversation about, you know, wages and everything. Like, daycare teachers are like a very integral part of, you know, early childhood teaching, aside from the parents, because there's so much social, emotional, and communication development that happens during those times. And so things like high turnover rates and the inability to like provide training for staff would be really detrimental in growth and development for those kiddos as well.
Little bit about me. LilyPad is licensed for 135 children here in Fond du Lac County. We have only been open about 7 years, and we have been maxed out. Sometimes, for just an idea of shock and awe, I have a binder. It's roughly 140 unique emails, single families that are on my wait list right now. Those are families that are either looking for care, do not have care, or are currently in unregulated or unlicensed care, or at a provider maybe they're not happy with. This is not giving the families the choices that they're looking for, which is just really disappointing. My 2 children are just both started elementary school together, and I started, my oldest daughter is Lily, so LilyPad was kind of for her and for our community. I never was in childcare before I opened it, but I knew there was such a need in our community, and it's still growing and growing. They're very right. It's unaffordable. I just sent out to my families this past week that my rates are increasing 10%. That's roughly to an average of about 200 on the low end per week and 250 on the high end per week, again, depending on it. And I'm more than happy to share rates. Those are always public knowledge with community members so they can understand. That's a huge hit for families. I've talked to a lot of my staff, my current families. They don't know what they're going to do, whether they can afford this, which is going to pull more people out of our workforce and our community. It's how it's going to happen is more and more will pull out of the community. We are going to have less people working, which means less availability. And typically it's women who do come out of the workforce to stay home with their children. So women-led careers, again, generally speaking, nurses, teachers, they're going to leave their careers to stay home and raise their children. Or there's more families that are telling me they stopped having children after 1, maybe 2, despite wanting to have a bigger family. They couldn't afford the childcare. They couldn't find the spots. Once you get into a center, I'm sure every director can attest, you never want to mess up your spot, because if you have more children, you're basically guaranteed that second spot for that next child. We do our best to keep families together, but it's not always guaranteed. So now families are driving all over, doing all different things. When I started, I was a yes person. I said yes to every family. I wanted to accommodate every hour, everything I could, switching shifts, doing different stuff. Unfortunately, I've become a no person. It's really not something I've ever wanted to do, but I have to tell families no a lot. They want to extend their hours of care. No, I don't have staff. They want to add a day. No, I don't have staff. You want flexibility, maybe only 3 days a week. No, I have people who take 5. So I've become a no person, which is now, again, removing that flexibility for families to spend more time with their kids.